Let us pray. We give thanks to God for the rich heritage of this province as found in our people. We pray that native-born Albertans and those who have come from other places may continue to work together to preserve and enlarge the precious heritage called Alberta. Amen.
Introduction of visitors.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure this afternoon to introduce to you, and through you to the rest of the Assembly, a progressive conservative member from the Manitoba Legislature, Mr. Gil Rock. Mr. Rock is seated in the members' gallery, and I'd ask him to stand and receive the welcome of the Assembly.
Presenting petitions, reading and receiving petitions, presenting reports by standing and special committees, notices of motions, introduction of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce Bill number 27, being the Alberta Healthcare Insurance Amendment Act 1986. Mr. Speaker, this bill is designed to eliminate extra billing by medical practitioners who are part or participating in the Alberta Healthcare Insurance Plan effective October 1st, 1986.
The Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care has moved first reading of Bill 27, Alberta Healthcare Insurance Amendment Act 1986. Does the Assembly agree to the motion for first reading? Opposed? So ordered.
A bill being Alberta Healthcare Insurance Amendment Act 1986, introduced by Honourable Mr. Moore, is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports. Introduction of special guests.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce to you and through you Glenn and Marilyn Alford and Cliff and Connie Alford. Glenn is Professor of Education at the University of Western Ontario of London, Ontario. They are visiting their son, Cliff, in Edmonton. I wish them to enjoy their Alberta stay, and please rise in the members' gallery and receive the warm welcome of this Assembly.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce to the Assembly three gentlemen from southern Alberta. The first gentleman, Peter Langman, Chairman of St. Mary's Irrigation District, Casey Aisman, a board member of that district, and Jim Brown, their manager. I'd like the gentlemen to rise in the gallery and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to introduce to you and through the members of the Assembly four people, two of which are from the constituency of Calgary-McCall, Pat and Dale Sokolowski, who are working very hard in the community and are here participating with a couple of gentlemen that are organizing a trip of some investors from Hong Kong to Alberta. Mr. Colin Wong from Hong Kong himself, now living in Calgary, and Mr. Ken Stewart. And I would ask that these four people rise and receive the normal welcome of the Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask a question of the Attorney General. I wonder if he would outline what specific steps he is taking to ensure that the proposed training camp of the Aryan nations set to go forth in southern Alberta will comply with the law, and particularly with respect to the use of weapons, acts endangering public peace, and the dissemination of hate propaganda.
Mr. Speaker, the particular organization referred to by the honourable member for Edmonton Highlands has come to the attention of the government in recent days through what I said yesterday was some excellent reporting work on behalf of the Calgary Herald, and of course has been observed before, going back as far as a year, in a report in the Alberta Report. Mr. Speaker, the organization in question is very small to the understanding of the government, and as I indicated, it's a difficult balance as to how much attention one should pay to an organization espousing such odious beliefs as we've read about and heard about, as to make sure that we don't provide too high a profile that they are permitted to engage in recruitment or encouraged to recruit people. Mr. Speaker, there are, of course, steps that the government will have to take to make sure that the laws of Canada are being properly and rightfully observed, including, of course, the criminal code would apply in most cases if, in fact, acts as have been reported upon might be advocated by this organization. I'm getting into a field of quite a hypothetical area, Mr. Speaker. I don't want to prolong it, but suffice it to say, in conclusion, that the government finds the reported aims and objectives of the organization in question to be odious and not acceptable to Albertans.
Well, supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. I would advance that there's nothing hypothetical about what this government might be able to do. I wonder then if the Attorney General has consulted with the Federal Justice Minister to advise that amongst other plans the Aryan Nations has in establishing this camp, that they would involve military exercises and drillings and thereby violate the criminal code.
Mr. Speaker, I haven't had discussions directly with the Minister of Justice for Canada on this subject, but I have said, and I repeat it here, that the creation of private armies in Canada is not an acceptable practice. And in fact, my knowledge has not been engaged in, except in a few isolated instances in the past, not in Alberta, however, and we will certainly do everything we can to discourage that taking place.
A supplementary question, Mr. Speaker, this time to the Solicitor General. I wonder if the Solicitor General has discussed with the RCMP any plans that they might have or he might have for policing this particular establishment to ensure that the sort of violations I referred to in the previous question would not in fact take place.
Mr. Speaker, the RCMP detachment near the referred to location of Caroline is aware of the alleged presence of this organization and has the area under general surveillance, as it would when there's suspicion of misdemeanors happening in any particular instance. I might also inform the member for Edmonton Highland that if, in the instance there were firearms brought into that location, the Solicitor General's Department, through the Firearms Control Officer, would in fact be investigating the situation, and appropriate measures would be taken at that time.
Well, supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask this final supplementary of the Minister for Municipal Affairs. I wonder if the Minister has any plan to meet with the municipality involved here, Caroline specifically, to ensure that before the local planning permission for this camp is granted, that the municipality will not be in breach of Section 2 of the Alberta Bill of Rights by unwittingly authorizing the infringement of the rights of Albertans of all races to security of the person and protection of the law.
Mr. Speaker, I have no information on what is proposed, and the municipality would deal with any questions of zoning or development.
Member for Little Bow.
Mr. Speaker, my supplementary question is either to the Attorney General or to the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and it's with the name of the organization formerly is the Church of Jesus Christ Christian Aryan Nations. And my question to either minister would be with regards to tax exemption of such an organization. Could either minister indicate whether consideration is being given as to whether this organization would be tax exempt relative to property or not in the province?
Mr. Speaker, that is a question of a legal opinion. I don't have one.
Thank you. Member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. It's time to the Premier. Has the government thought of, or are they willing to send a representative, possibly even from the Premier's office, to Caroline to get the government's reaction to construction of this camp and what is going on in the area?
Mr. Speaker, I've asked the Honourable Attorney General to handle this matter, and I feel he will fulfill those responsibilities.
Sorry. One more member. Rocky Mountain House.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Municipal Affairs. Has there been any start of any construction on this particular site at Caroline?
Mr. Speaker, I have not checked. And Mr. Speaker, in fairness, I think I should add that I have no information whatever that these people may have approached the municipality with.
I would like to designate my second question to the member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Mr. Speaker, in the absence of the Minister of Energy, my questions are to the Premier. Have the demonstrations by the oil workers today, both here and in Calgary, helped to convince the Premier that the situation for the Canadian sector of the oil industry is serious and that there's need for new programs and actions, or is the government satisfied to leave stabilization of our economy to OPEC?
Mr. Speaker, as we've said in the House many times, and the Honourable Member has been here, we consider the problems facing the energy industry in Alberta and, for that matter, throughout Canada to be very serious. And we have moved in a massive way to help in every way we can. We are considering, in addition, further programs. So, Mr. Speaker, I think it should be clear to the House that the government is doing everything possible to assist our energy industry.
Supplementary to the Premier, Mr. Speaker, could he give us some idea of what these new programs might be, especially given that some 80% of the rigs are idle?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Last year we made a massive cut in royalties. Then this spring we made another $100 million reduction in royalties, particularly to help small producers. In addition, we created an exploratory drilling incentive plan of $300 million. That would allow companies to have their exploratory drilling supported by the government in order that we have as much activity as possible. Then, Mr. Speaker, we created a $200 million industry activity program. That program is helping both in development drilling and in service work. In addition, Mr. Speaker, we are working with the federal government, urging them to help our energy industry because it is a national problem, not just a provincial problem. And, Mr. Speaker, we are also considering, as I've said before in the House, a stabilization program. I should also mention, Mr. Speaker, we've assisted Syncrude, we've assisted Husky, we've assisted Suncor.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Drilling, exploration, and service is very capital intensive and involves a lot of debt. Has the Premier asked his government officials to do any study of the merits for small business in the energy sector of debt adjustment legislation which provides a means of changing interest and repayment schedules so that Albertans stay in business?
Mr. Speaker, we are helping Albertans to stay in business in the ways I've already mentioned. We are not considering the representation from the honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, final supplementary. On Friday, the Premier refused to confirm that the Suncor Burnt Lake heavy oil project was being abandoned. What information does the Premier have on the status and fate of this project?
Mr. Speaker, I've asked the officials of my office to obtain the information for me. I report back to the House when I have it.
Supplementary, Westlock Sturgeon.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Also to the Premier, is the government now prepared to offer a low-interest loan package to small oil producers, which could be paid back in the future when price rises?
Mr. Speaker, there are a whole series of options which we are considering. I would say that that is one of the options, Mr. Speaker, and we are refining the proposals, and when we select one and obtain federal support as well, we will present it to the industry and to the House.
Main question, Leader of the Liberal Party.
Speaker, this is to the Premier with the First Minister's Conference now less than a week away. Albertans have still to be informed as to what's really on the agenda and the position of the government on each of the issues. But will the Premier be discussing, for instance, oil and gas price stabilization program with his counterparts?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Is the Premier, that's nice to hear, so we get some cooperation. Is the Premier prepared to discuss the implementation of deficiency payments for farmers rather than the two-price system for wheat, which would put thousands of our millers and bakers out of jobs? That's what his company or what his government has been recommending up to now.
Mr. Speaker, we've discussed both of those matters.
Going along, batting 0 for 2. Now, what areas, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, what areas of provincial control is the government willing to give up in order to strike the compromise referred to by the Premier and the gentleman from Medicine and the representative from Medicine Hat, in order to come to a working agreement for negotiating free trade with the U.S.? What areas of authority are you going to give up?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's hypothetical, and we certainly wouldn't telegraph it in advance.
It's nice to know that he's admit that everything's for sale in Alberta. Now, will the Premier be discussing, this is to the Premier, take your time, fellows, don't get excited, you can get your turn at the pipe at times. Will the Premier be discussing Native and Métis self-government at the conference?
I think it may well be discussed, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary, member for Calgary Mountain View.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As far as the agenda goes to the Premier, will the ratification process for a bilateral trade agreement with the United States be an item on the agenda of the first Ministers' Conference?
The matter of free trade with the United States, and which is, of course, bilateral trade negotiations and multilateral trade negotiations through the GATT series of discussions, I believe will all be discussed, Mr. Speaker. However, whether a ratification formula would be discussed is something I would be uncertain about.
Member for Little Bow, main question or supplementary? Main question, Leader of the Representative Party.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Premier. Recent Statistics Canada figures show that while the drop in oil prices has been disastrous for Alberta, it also shows that investment in industry in Ontario, Quebec, and Manitoba in the manufacturing sector has increased some 27%. My question, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, has the Premier had any discussions with Ottawa which would indicate that this trade-off is the real reasons for Ottawa's reluctance to help the oil industry, and that the federal action is unlikely so long as central Canada continues to benefit from the reduced oil prices?
Mr. Speaker, I've had discussions on the general topic with the federal government, and I have not had any indication from them that they are pursuing this from the idea of helping Ontario, Quebec, and Manitoba, as the honourable member mentions, and allowing Alberta to suffer.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question. The federal government has received, in terms of various methods, specifically royalties and taxes, some $56 billion through the National Energy Program. My question, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, has the Premier indicated this clearly to the federal government, and as well the benefits to central Canada, and indicated that at this point in time some of that money should be returned back to Alberta in terms of royalty reductions or straight assistance to the industry in this difficult time?
Definitely yes, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier. Is the Premier going to try to enlist the help of the consuming provinces to work out a long-term plan guaranteeing supply for all Canadians that would envisage a stabilized oil and gas prices over the next generation?
Generally, yes, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary, member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Supplementary to the Premier, Mr. Speaker. What specific demands, then, has the Premier placed on his Conservative counterparts in Ottawa with respect to regaining that $56 billion that was donated, in effect, to Eastern Canadian consumers?
You're one. Mr. Speaker, we have, of course, as all honourable members know, requested and had a considerable change to the National Energy Program. That was the program supported by the NDP and the Liberals, which was responsible.
Don't like to hear about it.
Which was responsible, Mr. Speaker, for the removal of the $56 billion supported by the two parties opposite. And, Mr. Speaker, we have had that change. We are still insisting on the removal of the PGRT. We are insisting on assistance for long-term nature and tax depletion and other methods in which the federal government can assist our industry, and we are also approaching them on a program of income stabilization for producers in this province.
Member for Redwater Andrew, followed by the member for Edmonton Beverly.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Agriculture, could the Minister, in light of yesterday's announcement that the Alberta Farm Credit Stability Program is in operation, indicate how many applications have been received to now?
Mr. Speaker, I can report that yesterday we received 73 applications, and as of noon today we've received 125 applications, and we're delighted that the farmers have been so receptive to our program.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Could the Minister indicate when the first loans will actually be processed and approved?
Mr. Speaker, that will depend upon the various financial institutions as quickly as they can process them. We are sending out the verification numbers on a very speedy basis, but it's our hope that the first loans will be approved and the money will be available within 2 weeks.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Could the Minister tell us whether financial institutions will have to work government hours 8 to 4:30 in order to get these verification numbers? Or is special consideration being given to keeping the Alberta Farm Credit Stability Centre open longer hours?
Mr. Speaker, we're not going to keep the hours of the New Democratic Party. We're going to extend them as we traditionally have. And what we're going to do, we've instructed those individuals who are responsible for the information flow and the verification numbers to stay open from 8 o'clock until 6. There is no noon hour break, and the hours will be staggered to ensure that the banking institutions will always have somebody available to them between those hours.
Thank you, Redwater Andrew. All right, member for Little Bow.
Your question to the provincial treasurer is with regards to the financial arrangements with the various institutions. Could the minister indicate what type of a fee schedule was established at the final stages of negotiation?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Last week we completed our negotiations with the representatives of the financial institutions And in doing so, we struck what we thought was a very good deal with the banking institutions in particular, who were the lead negotiations. And that is that the spread on the deposits will be of the order of 2 3/8%. And as well, the government has agreed to pay a transaction fee for every loan. And that, of course, will be a one-shot cost, will not be over the 20-year period. On top of it, I think, as honourable members are aware, in the case of rollover of loans with the similar institutions or same institutions where there has been a contractual obligation and there is some escalation of interest payments to allow a new refinancing to take place, the government will also cover the costs of those fees to that institution as well.
Member for Vegreville.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Agriculture, we measure our efforts in days and weeks, not hours and minutes, but will the ADC consider applications from producers who have been turned down by by private banks for application under this program?
I'm sorry, I believe if I heard the honourable member correctly, he said, will the ADC, is he talking about ADC or Farm Credit Stability Program?
From farmers who were turned down by banks.
The ADC traditionally has been the lender of last resort for this government, and that tradition will continue. The Honourable Associate Minister is the individual responsible as it relates to ADC, and if she wishes, I'm sure she would like to supplement that.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Sorry. Supplemental, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. Would view the fact that the lending institutions are the final authority or final arbiter as it stands now, would the Minister consider setting up a review committee or appeal committee just to look at those instances where it appears or the applicant may think he or she's been discriminated against unfairly?
Mr. Speaker, the criteria that we have given the bank through the excellent negotiations by the provincial treasurer has expanded the traditional lending patterns of our financial institutions to the extent that a farmer can borrow up to 100% of their equity. In the event that they have any loans outstanding, they can roll the entire amount up to a maximum of $200,000. I would hate to involve ourselves in that type of an appeal process because the financial institutions are the best ones to operate that. And just to underscore what I have said, I think it would be very unwise for there to be political interference as it relates to the lending criteria rather than involving ourselves in the regulations that we have given to the banking institution. And I'm sure the honourable member is not suggesting that we as politicians become loans officers.
Member for Edmonton Beverly, followed by the member. Member for Edmonton Beverly, followed by the member for Calgary Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Utilities and Transportation. And given the continuing high unemployment rate in the province of Alberta and the ever-increasing costs for the city of Edmonton, and the fact that the Edmonton Power is the only company operating without a low-cost fire plant, will the government be rescinding Order 38085, which ratified the Energy Resources Conservation Board recommendation on the commissioning of Genesee 1?
Mr. Speaker, number one, relative to the rescinding, we don't have any plans for that at this present time, but I should also qualify that in July of 1985, a letter was sent to the City Council, and I do believe the honourable member was a member at that time, which outlined the opportunity for the city to borrow some $300 million and for them to proceed at their will and with their wish with the project as they saw fit. And the commissioning date for the project has not changed at this point in time from what the ERCB planned back in 1985, and that is still October of 1989.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, and I believe that's a cop-out on the part of the government. I think the people of the province expect the government to fulfill its responsibilities. Will the minister even ask the ERCB to review this matter once again, especially in view that the new power projections, which will be available shortly, suggest that there's going to be perhaps a shortage of power?
The last part of that, Mr. Speaker, I would assume is somewhat hypothetical and outside the ballpark. What I would be prepared to do, though, is indicate that you're out there, you're playing in left field, I believe. Edmonton indicate to all of the members that when that letter did go out, there was a number of options that were available, and the city has not responded. And if I may just quote from part of it, the city will be free to manage the pace of construction of the project, including scheduling of work, with the knowledge that financing is available on the lowest cost basis.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, and of course the Minister is aware the city did respond, and we couldn't proceed with those conditions, in spite of those conditions. Will the Minister undertake for the Assembly that the government will assist the City of Edmonton in underwriting the unfair costs that have been imposed as a result of provincial policy?
They're big boys.
Mr. Speaker, I have some difficulty with the reference or the inference of an unfair cost in the sense that, as I understand it, once the project is commissioned, and that's in October of 1989, that the costs of that particular plant will be borne by all of the citizens of Alberta, and if that's unfair, then I'd like to know what is fair, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Will the Minister at least give the Assembly the assurance that the government will not permit any further deferrals in the construction dates of Genesee 1 and 2?
Was I just want to make sure, Genesee 1 and 2? Unfortunately, the commissioning of the plants are in reverse order. Genesee 2 is the one that is slated for October of 1989, and my understanding is that the ERCB, Energy Conservation Board, and the, I've got to get the right name just so that I don't get this all fouled up here, the Utilities Planning Board are constantly monitoring the requests for power at this particular point and will be coming to us with a report later on this year.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Supplemental to the Minister. In point of view, the tremendous drop in natural gas prices in the last year, has there been any studies conducted by your department as to whether or not these new coal plants coming on might be better to use natural gas until the price gets back to a certain level?
Not to my knowledge, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Calgary, the member for Pincher Creek, Crow's Nest.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. Could the Minister advise the Assembly or confirm to the Assembly whether the City of Edmonton had the option to opt out of the Electrical Energy Marketing Agency and therefore bear the full brunt of the costs of the power plant rather than having the people of the province of Alberta bear those costs? They could then proceed to construct the plant, have the benefit of the power. Could the Minister confirm whether or not that option is available in terms of opting out of the Electrical Energy Marketing Agency, which provides significant benefits to the citizens of Edmonton?
Mr. Speaker, that option was provided in July of 1985 to the City of Edmonton.
Thank you. Member for Calgary Buffalo, followed by the member for Edmonton Kingsway.
To the Minister of Community and Occupational Health, despite rising health care costs, this government has done little to encourage healthy lifestyle practices. It's now well documented that non-smokers suffer a great deal of harm to their health as well as significant discomfort through breathing residual cigarette smoke. Will particularly in House committees, will the government take steps to legislate the right of all employees to work in smoke-free workplaces?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't have time to take issue with the preface to the member's question, except to say that the good health promotion programs of this department and of this government are something that we can all be very proud of. But as for the smoking matter and the non-smoking matter, I certainly welcome the representation as a non-smoker of the member, and would encourage you to continue to talk to all of our colleagues in the House about that very important issue. But not to take the matter lightly, Mr. Speaker. I am concerned about the health effects of secondary smoke, and it's something that our people are certainly looking at very carefully. As for legislating that thou shalt not do it, it's not the practice or the policy of this government that we are going to legislate all of the practices right down to some of those kind of fine details in the workplace, Mr. Speaker, and I think it's incumbent upon workers in the workplace to practice that discipline, that self-discipline and consideration of others.
Well, perhaps I might direct a question to the Premier with respect to the government's own employees, and that is, will the government take steps to implement the right to a smoke-free atmosphere as a policy for its own employees so that they won't have to work in an unhealthy environment?
Mr. Speaker, I will consider the honourable member's representation.
So we won't feel neglected. To the Minister of Hospitals and Medicare, has the government considered varying premiums for Medicare based on whether a person smokes or not in light of its concern of the rising health care costs?
Mr. Speaker, I've considered varying them, raising them, decreasing them, a variety of things. But might I just add while I'm on my feet that the Department of Hospitals and Medical Care implemented phase 2 of a no-smoking policy in the department effective July 2nd. That effectively eliminates smoking by departmental employees except in 2 designated lounge areas at a building both here in Edmonton and one in Calgary. We believe, Mr. Speaker, that if any department of government ought to show some leadership in this regard, it's the Department of Hospitals and Medical Care, and that's just what's intended. We'll be sharing our experiences with other ministers and deputy ministers so they too might in the future consider such a policy on a voluntary basis, department by department.
Congratulations to the Minister and his department. Has the enlightenment spread to any other of the departments, or is he the only man in the regiment out of step?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's an important question because when you move in such a restrictive way, I believe that it's important that you have the full support of the employees. No other department could expect, I don't think, any better cooperation than the Department of Hospitals and Medical Care. I would like to think that it will take some months for us to be able to say that we have completed our policy in such a way that it could be useful to other departments in terms of implementation, and we'll certainly be sharing that with them. I might advise as well that most of the hospitals in Alberta have either moved already or in the process of moving in the same direction of having a smoke-free environment throughout the entire hospital with only designated sitting rooms being available for smokers.
To report that the Department of Recreation and Parks on September 1st will also be implementing the same policy, and this has been in planning for some time.
Member for Edmonton Kingsway Highlands.
I was asking a supplementary. That's in order, isn't it? Good. Yeah, I'd like to ask a supplementary of the Minister for Hospitals and Medical Care, too. Just a moment ago, in response to another question about Medicare premiums, he said he was considering raising them, lowering them, and whatever else. I'd like to ask, is the Minister considering eliminating health care premiums altogether?
When the honourable member of the opposition will come up with an effective way of replacing that revenue, I'd be pleased to consider it.
Member for Edmonton Kingsway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Edmonton Belmont.
My questions are to the Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs. Yesterday, the Alberta Securities Commission extended the suspension of First Commonwealth Securities trading privileges indefinitely. What will be the procedure for assisting the investors and the brokers that have some $10 million tied up by this move?
Mr. Speaker, just to set the record straight, my understanding of the decision of the Securities Commission yesterday was to extend a temporary suspension of a registration for a period of some 7 days, so that they will reconsider that on the 14th of August, which is next Thursday. The other part of the member's question had to do with the investors and clients of First Commonwealth, and I could advise that there is a receiver manager in operation at First Commonwealth so that the assets of the company are being preserved. And there are also steps being taken by the National Contingency Fund and the Stock Exchange, as well as the Securities Commission, which will, in due course and in as timely a fashion as possible, clear out the property belonging to the clients of First Commonwealth.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, a correction. It was an interim suspension, all right, but it was not assumed that the Commission had to reassess their case on, it was the onus is on the company on the 14th to have the order reversed, not on the Commission. The question. On Monday of last week, the minister said that investors would not have their money tied up until the hearings on this issue were completed. Now, these hearings may go on for several months or years. Will they be tied up that long? Will the investors and the stockbrokers' monies be tied up until those hearings are over?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it seems to me that I'm being asked a question that I cannot answer insofar as I don't know when the proceedings in total will be over. My information is that the clearing process by which those clients who wish to retrieve their securities or their cash on account will be dealt with as expeditiously as possible. That may take some weeks, but it will be done just as soon as is humanly possible.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Given the decade of problems that investors have had with the Securities Commission, will the minister expand her investigation into the regulations concerning blind pools and insider trading?
Blind fools are asking questions, did I hear? I didn't quite... The proposition that the honourable member prefaced his question with is one that I simply cannot accept. I do not believe investors are having problems with the Securities Commission. Now, given that that is understood, let me address the question which was a review, I believe, a review of the proceedings. Thank you. For blind pools and insider trading. Those have been, as the honourable member probably knows, been reviewed by the Securities Commission, and the operation of those are being reviewed by both the Securities Commission and the Stock Exchange. It would appear at this point in time that the rules themselves are not what the problem is, and in fact there are many instances in which the procedures have been used by other companies and nothing seems to be amiss. By the same token, the practice is being monitored on a constant basis, and I think, given some experience with it, the Commission and the Stock Exchange will be putting forward final recommendations.
Thank you. Final supplementary. Page 18 of your last release did say that the Commission was not reviewing the insider trading. There were some 4 or 6 pages of insider trading information which has not been reviewed by the Securities Commission. My last question is, since First Commonwealth was the major Alberta-based brokerage firm on the Alberta Exchange, what plans does the minister have to develop and strengthen the presence of Alberta-based brokerage firms on the Exchange now that First Commonwealth is out of commission?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the member is making a value judgment, and I would like to know which other Alberta-based brokerage firms he is comparing to. That's a fact that I am...
Minister. Honourable Member for Kingsway. The Chair hesitates to interrupt, but as has happened in the last 2 weeks, question period is not a time for debate and giving further information. It's a matter of framing the question, hopefully receiving the answer. And as pointed out with one of the other members of that same caucus, Standing Order 13, subsection 4 and B, when a member is speaking, no person shall interrupt that member except to raise a point of order. So I bring this back, the Chair brings it respectfully to the attention of the House. Question period is indeed for questions and answers, not for continued debate. Honourable Minister, please.
In terms of economic development in Alberta and capital formation, needless to say, I am, and this government is, very interested in encouraging the efforts of Albertans, particularly in view of the world trading opportunities that more and more of our citizens are entering. So any endeavor of that sort, we are fully behind.
Supplementary, member for Edmonton Meadowlark.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. In response to the Minister's statement concerning an interest in international economic and financial activity, could the Minister please indicate why this government did not become successful in getting the privilege from Ottawa to undertake international banking in this province as BC did and Quebec did?
Go to it, Dickie.
Go ahead, Nick.
The chair points out to the member for Edmonton Meadowlark that the question really is somewhat divorced from the original line of questioning. The chair, however, will recognize the member to come up if there's time at the end of question period to frame this new avenue of questioning.
Member for Edmonton Belmont, followed by the member for Edmonton Meadowlark, if there is time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions are directed to the Minister of Labour. Evidence presented at the Mindbender Public Inquiry last week included a letter from a senior official in the Minister's department warning that some catastrophe could occur due to the lack of time and personnel to perform effective maintenance on that Mindbender. Can the Minister advise the Assembly what information was then provided by Fantasyland staff that assured the department that corrective measures were being taken?
Mr. Speaker, I'm quite sure that the Commissioners of the Inquiry will follow that up during the further process of the inquiry, and those facts will be brought out at the inquiry.
This is separate from the inquiry, Mr. Speaker. Was that letter of warning, or that warned of the disaster, did it ever come across the Minister's desk?
It didn't come across my desk, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Is the Minister or the Department currently reviewing all of the rides at the mall to ensure that there are no more disasters or potential for disasters?
Mr. Speaker, perhaps the honourable member isn't aware of the fact that after I went round the Fantasyland on a tour of inspection with senior officials, the whole operation was closed down for the first day, and the other rides were opened sequentially as it was felt that they had been adequately inspected. Some of the rides were indeed closed for several days before they were reopened.
Final supplementary to the Minister of Tourism. Given the safety record of certain amusement rides, will the Minister of Tourism undertake to meet with the Minister of Labour to ensure that there is an immediate change to improve the regulations regarding both the inspection and maintenance of amusement rides at Alberta tourist attractions?
Mr. Speaker, we're always concerned that tourists that come to this province are everything that they attend has adequate safety measures. But I think the Minister of Labour has answered that question, and that's what the Commission of Inquiry is established to prove.
Supplementary question, Westlock Sturgeon.
Speaker, supplemental is to the Minister of Telecommunications, the former Minister of Labour. Could he confirm whether or not the letter warning of impending disaster came across his desk when he was Minister of Labour?
Yeah. Chair rules the question out of order. A minister cannot be asked questions with respect to a former portfolio. Chair recognizes member for Edmonton Meadowlark.
To complete my supplementary, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Credible brokerage industry is, of course, essential to accomplishing the kind of positive international presence that the Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs was talking about. Could the Minister please tell us what steps she has taken or previous ministers have taken to ensure that we will get international banking, the international banking privilege for financial institutions, including brokerage institutions in this province?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't think I'm in a position to answer all of that question, and indeed my colleagues may wish to supplement the answer. But let me assure the member for Meadowlark that we are, of course, very much encouraging any private individual who wishes to leap into this exciting economic future that we have ahead of us.
Time for question period has expired. Might the Assembly give approval to the completion of all questions with regard to this issue? Opposed? Carried. Further supplementary? Thank you. Member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
I'd just like to set the record straight with respect to some comments by the Premier. Although we... Point of order.
Forgive me, honourable member, is this a point of order that is being raised at the end of question period? Well, the chair would appreciate hearing the words point of order before the conversation takes place. Oh, I'm sorry.
I believe I did say point of order with respect, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to set the record straight with respect to some comments by the Premier. Although we expect to increase our number of seats from coast to coast, we were not the government, we were not the official opposition at the time of the NEP, so we could hardly be charged with bringing the NEP to the country. Furthermore, in addition, Mr. Speaker, our energy...
Sorry. The chair apologizes to the member for not having heard his earlier phrase, point of order, but the member has proceeded to convince the chair that there is indeed no point of order. There is a request by the Minister of Parks, of Recreation and Parks to supplement information which was raised during question period on Friday. Honourable Minister, and in this case the questioner, I believe, was Edmonton Highlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my absence on Friday, August 5th, the member for Edmonton Highlands raised a question pertaining to the filming of the '88 Calgary Olympics. While the question may or not be hypothetical, Mr. Speaker, it certainly is deserving of an answer. And while there's no decision has yet been finalized as indicated by the honourable member, and I would like to note as well that no company has an inside track. There will be an invitational tender out shortly, and all persons will have the opportunity at that time to submit their tender, and the decision will be made at the end of the year. I'd like to quote Mr. Waters, who's the media general manager as well. He indicates in a recent press interview that the committee has a policy looking to Alberta first, the rest of Canada second, and outside Canada third when obtaining goods and services, and would do the same for contracting the official film. I'd also like to supplement that, Mr. Speaker, that the Olympic promotion film for worldwide distribution was produced by an Alberta-based firm and is in production now.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the supplementary information. I would point out that there was nothing hypothetical about asking what the plans were for the government in this regard. I would like a supplementary question, though. The minister has said that the committee has noted that they have an Alberta first procurement policy when it comes to such contracts. If, in fact, an initial decision goes to a non-Alberta firm, do we have the commitment of this government and this minister in particular to go to bat for Alberta filmmakers to make sure that we are in the front running for that contract?
Well, we would certainly want to protect an Alberta-based firm, but we must remember dollars and cents do play a factor as well. We want to ensure that Albertans have the opportunity first to be employed and have the right to try and make the representation. But if there's a large dollar difference, it can't be borne by the taxpayer either. So we'll certainly review it at that time. But remember, the committee has the autonomy of decision-making as well. I respect their decisions and would certainly go to bat at any time for any Alberta-based firm, providing that it's competitive.
Point of privilege, I understand.
Mr. Speaker, in a point of privilege, I defer to the Speaker's characterization of my remarks in this House of August the 1st, and now rise under Standing Order number 15 of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta to raise a point of privilege. Now, the legislative function of this House and we as its members have been impugned. Such comments have no place in the proceedings of this House. I'm sorry. On July the 31st, the Premier made a personal comments in the House against the duly elected leader of the Alberta Federation of Labour. And such comments have no place in the proceedings of this House and constitute an effort or an affront to all bona fide organizations and their elected leaders who serve the province in so many ways. These comments may be viewed as a basis for the government's approach to the formation of the Review Committee on Labour. But in forming a committee to review labour legislation in this province, the government has excluded representation for the largest labour organization in Alberta. These comments undermine our function as legislators by evidencing a bias which will render the review impotent. Mr. Speaker, if I may make a move then. I move that the House command the Premier to apologize to the members of this legislature, to the President of the Alberta Federation of Labour, and to the people of Alberta for his unparliamentary comments on July the 31st.
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe my honourable friend has a point of privilege at all, but I will leave it to your judgment, as I always would. I do wish to say, though, Mr. Speaker, that my dislike for Mr. Whirlan, that the honourable member is referring to, is not based on his character or on his person at all. I don't know him that well. But rather it is based on his comments that he is determined to create social unrest and violence in this province, and that, in fact, Mr. Speaker, he was declaring war on the province of Alberta. When people say that, Mr. Speaker, I don't like them. The honourable member for Westlock Sturgeon is a friend of mine. If he said that, I wouldn't like him. So, Mr. Speaker, it merely places it in context. I must say, Mr. Speaker, that many members of organized labour in this province have called me to let me know that they disassociate themselves with the comments by Mr. Whirlan. And it is unfortunate that he's supported by the NDP and the Liberals.
Member for Edmonton Norwood.
Mr. Speaker, I think that the member from Westlock Sturgeon raised a reasonable request because it's clear in Hansard what the Premier said. He always has trouble. He does one thing and he says he's misquoted later, but this was in Hansard. And the fact that the Premier is not big enough to apologize says a lot about the Premier, not about Dave Whirlan.
That's right.
And Mr. Speaker, the honourable thing would have been to admit that you made a mistake and stand up instead of trying to justify on Cal's stupid remarks.
You bet.
On the point of privilege, and I think it's very unfortunate that we get into this kind of debate in this legislature relative to personalities and various things, but on the point of privilege, the privilege is relative to a person's, one person's attitude towards another that's a leader in the province. And as the Premier has explained, as I understand it, it certainly is in terms of actions or reflections upon activities in this province. And one of my great concerns, and as leader of this party over here, is the labour unrest that is presently going on in the province, and comments possibly from the Premier or even from this side of the legislature stimulate that unrest even more. I want to say very clearly, as far as Mr. Whirlan is concerned, in terms of some of the tactics and those comments, they are unacceptable to me as well. Certainly when he professes to be to the extreme left of the political spectrum, that even disturbs me more. And it is unfortunate that it comes into this House, because what it does is place a whole veil over the labour industry of this province. And there are many people in that labour industry that are not reflective of that man's philosophy, and it's unacceptable. And I think this matter should be closed at this point in time.
One shot. No. Sorry. Chair is prepared to stand here all afternoon if need be. The Chair appreciates the fact that notice was given by the member for Westlock Sturgeon to the office of the Speaker within the 2-hour notification period which is set out in standing orders. The Chair also notes that the matter was initially raised on Friday last, first as a point of order, and it was on that basis that the matter was put over until a future date. The matter of privilege has been raised. According to standing orders, Standing Order 15, subsection 2, a member wishing to raise a question of privilege shall give a written notice containing a brief statement of the question to Mr. Speaker, and if applicable to any person whose conduct may be called in question, at least 2 hours before the opening of the sitting. The Chair understands also that this second portion of notice was not complied with at the appropriate time. However, in discussion with the member for Westlock Sturgeon, the Chair's understanding is that the notice was given in the last hour previous to the opening of session this afternoon, the sitting this afternoon. In addition, we have now complied with subsection 6, which allows debate to appropriately be given within the Assembly, after which time the Speaker makes the decision as to whether or not a prima facie case of privilege does indeed exist. The Chair has examined the record of Thursday last and the statement by the Honourable Premier, and indeed the Chair's view is that the statement as made was not unparliamentary, it was rather a statement of personal opinion. And all members are referred to page 894 of Hansard of July 31st, 1986. Indeed, that then is seen as being the personal opinion of the Premier of the province in his personal capacity. Another issue is raised with respect to whether or not persons are protected. And so it is that in Brochane, citation 321, subsection 3, the Speaker has traditionally protected from attack a group of individuals commonly referred to as those of high official station. The extent of this group has never been defined. Over the years, it has covered senior public servants, ranking officers of the Armed Forces, the United Kingdom High Commissioner for Canada, a Minister of the Crown who was not a member of either House, and the Prime Minister before he won a seat in the House. So that if one takes into consideration this heading known as protected persons, that would not refer to the person referred to last Thursday in this Assembly. Again, having reviewed the matter and listened to the debate, and also made reference to Erskine May with respect to speeches in Parliament that are not actionable, the Chair rules that this is not a prima facie case of privilege. The matter is at an end. Orders of the day.